My name is Adam Wilson, and I'm the Group Program Manager for the Power BI service. I'm joined today by Dima Zaid Al-Khalani, who's a colleague of mine.
That's right.
And today we're going to talk to you about Power BI for the enterprise. How many of you have already deployed Power BI inside of your organizations? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for using Power BI. And for those of you that haven't given it a chance, I think this session will be a good primer on the things you need to consider as you look at deploying Power BI inside of your organizations. There are three main topics we're going to cover today. First of all, we'll start by discussing how you can connect to your data. And Dima's going to cover this. We'll look at the different data sources supported by Power BI and how you can get those set up to work with our service. The second topic will be how you can build and manage content and how you can collaborate as a BI team in delivering that to your organizations. And then third are a set of topics around security and compliance so that you understand both how Power BI protects your data, but also what you can do to control and audit the usage inside of your organizations as well. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Dima, who will talk about connecting to enterprise data, and then I'll rejoin for the second half. Dima?
Thank you. Again, my name is Dima Zaid Al-Khalani. I'm the program manager for the gateways, which you'll know in a few minutes what it is. So I'll be walking you through how to connect your enterprise data to Power BI, what are the available data sources, and how you can accomplish the best dashboards using the enterprise data on-premises and on the cloud. So in order to build any dashboard or any report you want to use in Power BI, there are three main questions you need to consider. The first one is, where does your data live? Is your data already on the cloud? You've deployed it, you're happily using Azure Data Warehouse, Azure SQL, or is it still on-premises using the analysis services or a SQL server? The next question is, how do you connect to your data? Are you going to go with importing your data and setting a scheduled refresh, or you're going to go with a live connection or a direct query to your data? And we'll talk more about when to use which. And finally, how do you refresh your data? If it's on the cloud, how do you do that? And if it's on premises, how do you accomplish a connection? So first, where's your data? Many enterprises still have their data on premises, and many small organizations and even enterprises have already made the move to the cloud. So your data could be either on the cloud or on premises. If your data was on the cloud, in Power BI, we do support both modes. You can either access your data through a direct query, so you always have an up-to-date data. Every time you open the report, it's the last data you see for Azure SQL, Data Warehouse, and Spark HD Insights. Or you can do an import data and then schedule a refresh on your convenience of when do you want your data to be up-to-date. Or you can use the REST APIs to stream this data that you've configured. Then we have a long list of supported cloud data sources that I'm not going to list here because we have a big variety of data. You can go to the Power BI documentation, check which data you can use from desktop, which from the content packs, and which you can go through immediately from the service. Now, the more complicated one, which is what if your data was still on premises? Power BI again, supports on-premises data. So if your data in your enterprise is still on-premises and you would like to take advantage of the Power BI cloud service, you can still do that without having to move your data to the cloud and at the convenience of your data still being on-premises through a live query. So we do support a smaller set of data sources, and we're working hard to keep this list growing. One of these data is the most popular one, SQL Server Analysis Services. We also have Oracle DB2 MySQL. Also, we support files, folders, SharePoint on-premises list. And the latest item we've added to the list last month is using ODBC driver-based connections. So if you're using an ODBC driver connection from Power BI Desktop, you can also use the gateway to do that. So the next question is, now you've decided where your data is, you know where it is, it's loaded. How do you refresh it, and how do you connect to Power BI? So as I mentioned, there are two methods, import and direct query. So depending on your scenario, depending on your needs, and depending what is your environment like, there's a lot of things to consider to answer, are you going to go with import or a direct query? So let's go through import first. For import, the refresh frequency is going to be scheduled, where you go to data settings, scheduled refresh, and set up the frequency up to 8 times a day. The performance, there will be no noticeable delay since the data is already cached in the cloud or in the Power BI desktop, which takes us to the next point with the data storage. So it's cached in the Power BI service. Thus, we do take a snapshot of your data at the time, so it will be stored in the cloud in Power BI. The next one is the limitation has grew from 250 megs to 1 gigs, a compressed data per model. And finally, for security, you can create a row-level security for every data set, and it only works for import. Now, for direct query, the difference is from the name. It's live, it's real-time. You don't have to worry about schedule and refresh. It will always be up to date when you're viewing the content. Performance will depends on how fast your data source can keep up with the queries and how fast it can run the queries. And for the data storage, unlike the import, your data will not be stored in the cloud except for a really small amount of data used for optimizing loading the tiles. So on the data size, there's no limitation. You can have as much data you want. And the security, we will reuse the on-prem row-level security you have set up in your analysis services. One thing to point out in addition here is for performance, the live query will be multiple queries run per who is looking at the report. So this is another thing to consider. For scheduled refresh, it will always be one query being run whoever is looking at the data. Since you configure it once, it runs whenever you want to kick off the refresh. For direct query, it will run multiple times depending who's looking at the data as it's different row-level security. So it's another thing to consider. Now, you've decided where your data was. You've decided how do you want to connect. And finally, the big question is, how do you refresh it? Well, if it was a cloud data source, as we mentioned, it's simple. You choose, depending which authentication type is supported, you sign in, and you're ready to go. And you can have a live connection or a scheduled refresh based on the data source. But what if it was an on-premises connection? We all know that any outside data cloud service cannot easily access your on-prem connection. So what we provide there as a solution in Power BI to enable you to still have the same experience, same dashboard, same reports, we provide what we call the on-premises data gateways, which we have in 2 flavors we'll talk about, but personal and the enterprise one. So what is a gateway? So a gateway is like, think about it like a bridge that will sit in between your on-premises and the cloud service. It will act as a bridge to send your queries, securely ensure your data does not leave your on-premises decrypted, and will ensure that if you're in a big enterprise, you want to have a centralized access to all this data, you can still have it. So I'm going to pause there and ask, how many of you have already used the gateways? Okay, that's great. So for the gateway, as of July, before July, it was just a Power BI gateway. So in July, we made it, we've extended it to even support 3 more cloud services, which are under the business application platform, Microsoft. So you can reuse the same gateway you've been using to use Power BI, Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, and Azure Logic Apps. So you can use the same gateway, deploy it once, and reuse it to send out your queries to on-premises data sources. For Power BI, it's read-only access, but for all the other services, it's all read, write, update, and delete support. So for Power BI, we have 2 gateways. The first one is the personal gateway, and the other is the on-premises data gateway, or previously was called the enterprise gateway. So the target persona for the personal gateway is a business analyst. So they set up it once, and they use it for themselves. They can use the dashboard and share it with other people, but still, it can only be used by one person, whoever sets up the gateway. On the other hand, the enterprise gateway or the enterprise mode, you can use it by a BI admin, by the IT admin. They can set it up, and we can show you how you can add a security group to the list of users and administrators so multiple people can take advantage of what you've already set up. The features from the personal gateway, the first one is import with scheduled refresh. On the enterprise gateway, we do support live query in addition to the scheduled refresh. The data source connections are managed per user. In the gateway, it's managed, it's central data source management, so multiple people can manage it and modify it and delete it. And finally, central monitor and control is provided by the enterprise gateway, but not the personal gateway. And as we mentioned, the service supported, the personal gateway only is supported with Power BI, where if you'd like to take advantage of the unified gateway, you can use the enterprise gateway for all four cloud services. So jumping to a quick demo of the enterprise gateway. Seven. Okay. So as we mentioned, the gateway, which we'll be showing today, is the on-premises data gateway. Flickered.
Hold on, let's just try this again. Let me just,
I'm sure we have extended.
maybe it wasn't, we're just gonna go back here.
Okay, so why did we figure this out? The gateway is, as we mentioned, acts as a bridge between the on-premises and the cloud services. So in order to use the gateway is basically a piece of software that you install on your machine on your on-premises. Preferably, it should be a server machine that could handle the request that goes through the gateway, but it also works on the client OS. So setting up the gateway is pretty simple. It's basically two easy steps. The first one is configuring the gateway, signing in to your Power BI account or your AAD account. After that, you give the gateway a name, a friendly name that you would like to use, and finally put in a recovery key that we will talk a bit more about how this recovery key will be used to ensure the transmission is secure. So.
The demo gremlins hit in the 10 minutes between when we started and when we switched to the demo. We'll get this working 1 second. Yeah, let's just try this one.
Okay, we can continue on the slides. Would that work?
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Sorry.
We had. Reconnect. Oh.
Why don't you go to the slide?
Okay, I'll go through the slides and. Sorry about that. We'll go back to the demo in a minute. So before we show you the gateway, let's talk about the architecture. How do we ensure this gateway actually is secure and keeps your data encrypted outside your on-premises? So first, you need to install the gateway on on-premises machine. As I mentioned, preferably a server that can handle it, or it could be a client operating system. So it's configured. Once it's configured, we ask you for a recovery key. And that recovery key will be used to generate both a symmetric and asymmetric key that will be used to encrypt your credentials outside the on-premises and only decrypt them once they are on that gateway machine. So they never leave your on-premises environment decrypted. So let's say you have a scheduled refresh. Once Power BI kicks off a refresh, which is up in the Power BI box there, the data movement service, which is the cloud piece that supports the gateway, analyzes the query and pushes it to the right gateway, which the gateway will be associated to your data set, so it knows through which Azure Service Bus relay to go through. So based on the gateway, it checks which is the service bus relay, gets the request, and service it. Once the gateway does that, it decrypts your credentials only then and sends the query for the data source for execution. After execution, the gateway securely back again uses the Azure Service Bus to push the data up to Power BI so you can see all the data. This is true also for the live connection, where this will happen every time you open the report or anyone opens the report. Oh, it's ready to go. Let's go back to the demo. Okay, screen works, network works. Okay, so we won't be spending time going through the configuration of the gateway. It's pretty simple. You just have to sign in, give it a friendly name, and give it a recovery key. As I mentioned, the recovery key will be used for two scenarios. One we've mentioned, which is generating the symmetric key that will be used to encrypt your credentials. The second one is for disaster recovery, which we will briefly talk about in a bit. So once I have my gateway set up, I can do one thing from the software here. So once I have it set up, I don't need to go back here. All the configuration and management will be done in the Power BI service, but I can use it for one more thing, which we've added in the last release, which is this button here, which is called Export Logs. So a lot of the time, there might be running into issues with your proxy configuration, network configuration, access to your data source. And then multiple times, we ask people to go get the logs, and if you've tried the gateway and you want to get the logs, there's a lot of logs to go through. You have the configuration logs and you have the service logs. So we've put them all in one place under a zip file where you can take it and send it to your IT admin so they can understand what is happening with the network configuration, or even to the Microsoft support so we understand what exactly your gateway is trying to do. So let's go back to Power BI Desktop where you would start. So I have my AdventureWorks, the famous AdventureWorks report that is connected using a direct query. As we mentioned in the beginning, you have the option between direct query and the import. So you can, in order to know at the bottom right to your screen, you can see direct query enabled. If you want to change it to import, you can do that. So once I attempt to publish my report, I choose my workspace, and hopefully it will go smoothly, and it will publish the data set, it will publish the report, so I can start building a dashboard on top of it. So what's saying, this is intended, it's planned by part of the demo. So when I attempted to publish to Power BI, what happened is, because this is a direct query, we do not store your data. So what is actually happening is the cloud service is attempting to make a connection to your data source, which in this case sits on premises. And it's trying to do that, but it can't because I don't have a gateway to sit in the middle to take that request and securely transfer it. So what I need to do is go to my report, show you that what it looks like when it's not working, where the ties are broken. They're attempting to access my data source, but it can't because there's no data to load. There you go. So again, it's telling me that I need a gateway. I need to configure a gateway. So in order to configure the gateway, at the beginning, I mentioned there were two steps. For the enterprise gateway, the second step is actually adding your data source. We've added this step to make it even more centralized, that only one person can go and add a data source and then can share it with as many people as they want. It could be different users, or it could be a security group that I can share this data source with. What it means to share a data source with someone is I'm giving you, if I add Adam as a user to this data source, it means if Adam is attempting to publish a report using this same data source, Adam is allowed to use the gateway that I've set up, which is different than being an admin, which we will talk about in a second. So as you can see, we have the list of supported on-premises data sources in the gateway from Microsoft data sources, third-party data sources, and the ODBC one. So I'm going to choose the SQL Server. Gonna copy the name of my server. And then the name of my database. And finally, as I mentioned, per data source, we support different authentication type. For SQL Server, we support both Windows and Basic. So I'm going to choose Windows here, put in my alias and my password. And connection is successful. So what happened here basically is I added this data source to be used in my gateway. This is the users tab I was mentioning, where I can add people here. I can add a security group, so it's even more centralized. If I need to change something with regards to who can access it, who cannot, I can do it from here. The other level of security is the admin. So an admin, if I add someone to the admin list or a security group, what basically means I give them an access to add the data sources, remove data sources, and actually remove my gateway. So you want to be careful of who you add as an admin, but if you want to add as many people as you want to the users list, all privilege you're giving them is that they're allowed to use your gateway to go through their on-premises data sources. One more thing we support with the on-premises data gateway is in case if you're using analysis services, we've had a lot of votes and user voice that people want to map their AD to AD users or one-to-one mapping between their usernames. So what we've added is a feature called UPN mapping that will enable you to pass the right user to the analysis services. So analysis services is special in a case where we passed the Power BI service account as the effective username. Versus all other data sources, we only pass the actual account you just used to configure the gateway. So for analysis services, we give you the opportunity to use whichever connection type you want to use, which is using effective username or custom data, map it between one-to-one, or maybe that you can set up a rule here, and then you can get going. So once we have this ready, we can go back to our dashboard, and we can load it again, and there we can see that the tiles, now the connection will go through the gateway, and and the tiles should load correctly. As you see, it's now going, it's not. So it should be going through the gateway now, and it's giving me the right data back. Yeah, there we go. So another form of method, which is the ETL. So what I can do here is use the gateway to schedule a refresh, which means whenever scheduled refresh kicks in, I want to choose the gateway that runs this query. In this case, I can use the gateway that I just set up and click apply, and it's ready to go. Yep, so now whenever a scheduled refresh I want to do from here, which we said up to 8 times a day, it will go through the gateway, and the gateway will take care of running the query on my behalf. So going back to the slides, we've talked about the architecture, we've talked about the security, how we use the recovery key to encrypt your credentials. And now the next topic, which is most interesting for people who've been using the gateway, is tips and tools of how to troubleshoot if you're running into an issue with the gateway. The first one, if you cannot create a data source on the gateway, the first option, which we always recommend, is try to connect through a different data source. It might be your data source is down, might be the table name you have or the database name you have no longer is valid, so make sure you verify that. And then the other thing is, it could be really, it's unreachable. It could be offline. It could be your gateway is offline at the moment you're trying to reach. And finally, take a look at the gateway logs. So we've made it easy now that you can export the logs and have them in one place, so you can take a look at them and see really what's happening. We've had a lot of instances where users were looking into generic error on the service, but once they look in the logs, they can see exactly which table they're trying to access and which database is being unreachable. The other point is if the data stopped refreshing. We provide a refresh history in the scheduled refresh pane, so you can take a look at that and see what happened. Might be that your gateway is unreachable, or your data source happens to be not accessible at that point. And finally, open Fiddler and ensure that the gateway that the call is going all the way through the gateway. Sometimes there might be issues all along the way. We're working really hard to make it as easy as possible for customers using the gateway and other tools to be able to isolate and understand the issue, but meanwhile, you can use Fiddler to ensure that the request is going all the way through the gateway. The next topic is disaster recovery. So you can imagine how important now the gateway becomes to you if you have multiple reports that you're sharing with tens of thousands of people. So you want to ensure that the gateway is always running and it always processing your requests. But what could happen if, let's say, the gateway admin leaves the company, or, for example, the machine where the gateway is installed on happens to just disappear or crash, and you no longer have access to the physical gateway? So we provide a way to restore that gateway, which is using the recovery key. So this is the second way we use the recovery key. So when you are downloading the gateway, configuring it, we ask you for one or the other. Do you want to register a new gateway, which you will be allowed to give it a friendly name, a recovery key, and so on, or you can migrate, restore, or take over a gateway. So another scenario could be that you installed it on a laptop, you've configured everything, now you want to move it away to a server machine. So you can use this option. Once you do that, we show you the list of gateways that you are an admin on. So it's important always to have someone other than yourself as an admin in this case. And the next option is provide the recovery key. So the recovery key is a minimum of 8 characters long that you need to have at a safe place, accessible for people or qualified people to get the gateway at any given time. So in case the machine disappears, you will choose the gateway, you will put the recovery key, and now you will have the new gateway on the new machine acting the same name, the same connections, as if nothing happens, it's just the machine changed. So this is the best way for disaster recovery to restore your gateway. So the question of the year, which we always get, which is where to install the gateway. What is our recommendation for our customers on where to install the gateway? So we always have the same answer, which it depends on your usage for the gateway. If you have a really heavy direct query running through your gateway, what we recommend is to isolate it from any other scheduled refresh. Because the gateway, all it's doing is it's passing your connections to go through to your data source. So if so many queries fighting for the same resources, that might end up having a slower performance. So if you want to ensure your direct query is running quickly and smoothly, make sure to isolate it. If you have a really light load on your gateway, you can install, you can have as many data sources on one gateway on one machine. We can ensure that it will run smoothly. So our recommendation has always been to start with an 8-core machine if it's available, and then keep an eye on the performance counter. One thing that the gateway, the enterprise gateway supports, which is give you the performance counters that you can build reports on, you can remotely access them and see how your gateway is doing. Another thing that we've started working more on, which is on your logs, you can see how much time your queries took to run, how much time, what was the timeout of your connection, of your query. So you can have all those information in your logs in order to see how your gateway is doing and how the machine is performing. And finally, tips and best practices for using the gateway. We have a monthly update every month. Sometimes we do not announce it in our blog post, as it would be a lot of perf fixes and bug fixes, but always make sure you have up to date. Keep it always on and credentials up to date. This is really important, that the gateway will be online, the gateway will be powerful and strong to run your queries as long as your machine is online. Your machine goes offline, you don't get to run any of your queries. And then make sure that your outbound ports to be open to the gateway computer. So the one that is needed is 443, and then additional ports needed are 9350 to 9353. So as I mentioned, the gateway can be installed on a Windows server or client OS, but the heavier you want to use it, you want to be it on a server machine. and it cannot be installed on the same machine with a local domain controller. We've got a couple or 3 incidents where someone would be unable to connect to their gateway and configure it, and we found out that the local domain controller does not play well with the gateway on the same machine. So try to install them, or make sure to install them on different machines. And you could install the enterprise gateway, can be installed with a personal gateway. It also can be installed with another Microsoft gateway, which is the ADF gateway, which is the data management gateway. You can have them side by side. And finally, we work really hard to keep our FAQ section up to date. Every time we get a question, multiple times or even once that is common enough, we do add it to our FAQ. So take a look at it. We have a whole section about proxy configuration in case you would like to do that for your gateway, and all other incidents that other customers might have run into. And please, you can leave comments and questions there. We do keep an eye on it daily. And that's it. Back to you, Adam.
Thanks a lot, Dima.
And one thing to mention, we'll be taking questions about the gateway at the end of the session.
Great. So that was a good overview of how to get your data into Power BI. And we know many of you have on-premises data sources, and certainly the gateway makes that process easy to manage and powerful in terms of debugging it. We're going to move on to the second section now, which is about how you actually build and manage the content that you're going to deploy to your end users with Power BI. And there are 2 parts to this section. The first part is about the content lifecycle. So we'll walk through what you do to build and manage and then deploy content. And then at the end, we have a few tips and tricks on ways to do this effectively, especially at enterprise scale. We really see 3 different parts to the content distribution lifecycle. The first is around creating content. So we'll talk about the different kinds of content in Power BI and how to choose which one to use, dashboards or reports, for your end users. The second phase of the lifecycle is how you collaborate. Many of you work in large teams, and many people in the teams need to author content and manage configuration settings in order to deploy a solution. So we have tools that help you do that, and we'll walk through those as well. The third part is really about how you distribute what you've built to the end users in your organization. And this is really a spectrum, and we know that no organization is the same. Some of you have end users that literally will just look at reports, and that's all they want. Sometimes they just want them printed out. And then other organizations will have end users that really want to explore the data and dig more deeply into it. Power BI supports that whole spectrum of content distribution, and you can choose what makes the most sense for your organization, and it might even be a mix of those. So we'll start with the creation aspect. And I want to caution you, this is not going to be a session on how to create effective dashboards or reports. We have other sessions on that, and I'll give you some pointers to those at the end of this talk. But I just want to highlight the different kinds of content that we have and how to choose between them. At the basic level, we have dashboards and we have reports. Reports are created mostly in Power BI Desktop, and they give you an interactive experience where you can click around and cross-filter and explore data. They're connected to one particular data set. The second kind of content we have is a dashboard, and this is something that you build in the Power BI service. And a dashboard is really a content aggregator. It lets you bring together lots of different data sources together in one place, so you can have a 360-degree view of your business on one dashboard. So ultimately, you're going to choose to use dashboards or reports based on what you need. So I'll go into a little bit more details about the 2, and then you'll be free to make the decision to use them depending upon your use cases. So dashboards, as I mentioned, are really an aggregator. There are a whole bunch of different tiles that can appear on a dashboard. One major kind is a report tile. So these are individual visuals from reports that you pin to a dashboard. You can pin tiles that represent direct or import data sources from those reports. You can use cloud or on-prem models. You can even pin tiles from a SQL Server reporting services on-prem report up into Power BI. So a whole bunch of different reports can be represented in your dashboard. And it's great because they function as navigation too. Because when you click on a tile in a dashboard, it takes you through to that report to explore more deeply. You can also upload Excel reports to Power BI and take individual regions in those Excel reports, be it worksheet ranges or charts, and pin those to your dashboard as well. The other thing you can do in a dashboard is ask questions with Q&A. And I'll show this a bit later, but it lets you just formulate a natural language question, and Power BI will bring you back an answer based on the data on your dashboard. And then finally, we have support for widgets. And these just let you bring a whole bunch of different kinds of content onto your dashboard. Everything from text to an image to an embedded video. We also support recently something called real-time streaming tiles. So you can take real-time data and put that right on your dashboard as well. You can do this by integrating with our APIs, but we also have announced some partnerships, most recently with a company called PubNub that is a real-time streaming service. So without writing any code, you can get real-time data onto your dashboard too. So contrasting dashboards to reports. Reports are all about deep analysis on one particular data source. And they're about interactivity. If you use Power BI Desktop, these are the same reports that exist in the service. You can cross-filter. You can put slicers on these reports so that end users can go through a bunch of different buckets of data. You can add filters so that people can filter it down just to their view. And as you expect with Power BI Desktop and also in the service, you get precise control over the layout and styling that exists on your reports. So reports and dashboards are the main kinds of content that you're going to create and distribute to end users. Use them both as you wish. Second part of the content distribution lifecycle is about collaboration. In some organizations, you might just have one person, one analyst who is building reports and distributing it to end users. And in this case, it's relatively simple. But we know in many organizations, you have a team of analysts. And it's important that when you have a team, everyone is able to access content, upload new content, make changes, access settings. And because this is so important, we actually have a capability in Power BI built just for this. And it's the concept of group workspaces. So every user of Power BI has something called a My Workspace. And this is where they put their own content. If they just upload a Power BI desktop file, or if they connect to a content pack like Google Analytics, that shows up in their My Workspace. And this is just meant for them to create and manage their own data. But if you are planning a deployment of Power BI within your organization, you should be looking at using group workspaces. Because a group workspace lets you take a number of different users and give them all edit permissions on a set of artifacts in that group workspace. And this applies to making edits to dashboards, uploading and changing reports. This also applies to all of the settings on data sets. So for example, you can go in and change all the data set settings, the refresh schedules, and everything. And if someone moves off the team, it's fine, because there are other people that can still go in and manage it. I'll mention, though, that workspaces are really a content creation artifact. It's where you go to create and edit content. And that's where you're going to put it all after you've built it. When you distribute it, you're going to use another mechanism. The one time you might use workspaces to invite others to view content might be in the case of user acceptance testing. Maybe you want some early users to try it out and make sure that the data looks right. And for that, you can use something called read-only group members, which allows certain people to go in and see the content in a group workspace. So I want to talk about a number of best practices here. The first one is, if you think that you're going to have more than one person working on content, you should start in a group workspace. It's going to make your life a lot easier. There aren't limits in terms of the number of these you can create, so it's not like you need to conserve them. So if you think about using something with more than one person, it's a great idea to put that in a group workspace just to start. Second thing is, we have a lot of users that ask, what do I do to keep track of the different versions of my Power BI desktop files? Some teams already have their own version control, and you're free to use that if you want to, and then publish the reports up to the Power BI service. But one thing that we also suggest is that you could use the built-in versioning in OneDrive for Business to store your files and preserve the version history. And the great thing is, if you put your Power BI desktop files in OneDrive for Business and then connect them to Power BI, whenever that file changes in OneDrive for Business, it'll be reflected in Power BI as well. There is a really, really good document in that third bullet point on how to use group workspaces effectively. And I really encourage you to read this. It's a short blog post. It'll give you a good foundation on exactly the practicalities on how to do it. If you're looking for a much more in-depth discussion of the different approaches for managing BI consumption in your organization, we've also worked on a deployment white paper that you can take a look at in the fourth link. This is not short, it's many pages long, but it lays out all the different options depending on how advanced your organization is, how wide the distribution is, and how much you want end users to participate in editing content as well. So that's a really good resource too. I want to move on to the third part of the distribution, the content distribution lifecycle, which is actually the distribution part. And this is where I mentioned it really is a spectrum. And because it's a spectrum, we have a whole set of different options that I'm just going to run through. You don't have to use all of these, but I at least want to show you the menu of what's possible so that you can pick and choose what you want. OK, so let's just dive into it. Sharing is the most basic way to distribute content. You can go to a dashboard, and you can click the share icon, as you see in that screenshot there. You can enter in email addresses, and people will get an email to go and access that dashboard. Now, it's only sharing one dashboard at a time, and it's only applicable to dashboards themselves. But this is by far the easiest way for people to get content. Changes are visible immediately. So as soon as you change a dashboard or report, everyone who that's shared with are going to see that instantly. And the great thing about dashboard sharing, too, is that you can also share outside of your organization to anyone that has a work or school email address. They don't need to have a Power BI account at the beginning, but one will be created as part of that process. Now, if you are planning large-scale enterprise deployments of Power BI, you really should look at organizational content packs, which are a little bit more robust and have more features than basic dashboard sharing. The first difference with content packs is that you can group together multiple dashboard reports and put them into one content pack, so you don't have to share them individually. Second thing is you can go in and control who has access to those content packs, either with individual users, security groups, or you can use Office 365 modern groups. The other major advantage of content packs is that you can stage changes. You can make changes to your reports and dashboards without them being visible to end users. And once you're happy with the results, you can then go and republish your content pack, and then the end users will see those changes at that point in time. So it gives you a chance to make sure things are in a good state before they get deployed to end users. So those are the two basic ways to share content within the Power BI service itself. But you can also integrate content into other external applications that you might have. So this is with something called the Power BI APIs. We have a REST API set that lets you embed a report or a dashboard tile directly into your application. We can take care of the authentication of the users. All you need to do is just get the iframe URL from our APIs and embed that into your application. The one thing I will mention, if you want some good examples of this, we have some partners that have built some good samples. DevScope has a great example of how this is used to embed content into PowerPoint and into SharePoint, which is a good example of how it can be used. We also have samples that you can use as well as you think about integrating it into your own portals. The other thing I'll mention about the REST APIs is that if you've heard of Power BI Embedded, which is our Azure offering, they use the same API set. So with Power BI Embedded, that's primarily meant for ISVs building applications that want to embed analytics. But those are the same APIs that you can also use inside of your organizations to embed your own content for use by your own users. The next way of sharing is a very different way, but it can apply to many organizations. It's called Publish to Web. And it lets you take a report and create an embed code that can be used on a public website. So it's not something that's intended to be secure, but a lot of organizations have analytics that they want to put on their own public-facing websites or share with their customers. Corporate sustainability reports, financial earnings, all of these are examples of where public data might be useful for your own organization. And so with Power BI, you can create a report, and then right inside your Power BI environment, you can go and click Publish to Web, and that'll give you an embed code that you can use right on your blog or website. OK, finally, we have a couple more things, but we have a set of static embed options. You could print. That's one thing you can do. Not interactive, but a lot of people like it printed. The other thing we have that's relatively recent is something called data alerts. And this lets you take a metric on your dashboard and create a threshold-based alert. So you can say, hey, if my reliability drops beneath 99%, send me an email. And then Power BI will automatically send you an email if that condition is met. We're also working on two more ways to get static content, which are really interesting. One is export to PowerPoint, which we've heard from many of our users. This is coming a little bit later in October, but it will let you take a report and export and create a PowerPoint of that. So watch for that on the blog. And then the final thing is we're working on email subscriptions. So you can set up a dedicated subscription to receive a daily or weekly email with a snapshot of your dashboard. And again, that's coming later this year, so watch for the blog if you're interested in that functionality too. Mobile is a really important part of Power BI, and we have a great set of mobile applications across many of the mobile platforms, Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. You can do many of the things you can do in the service, including view your dashboards and reports. We also have the capability for you to use mobile optimized dashboards, which I'll show you. And finally, we also have some specific mobile capabilities, like filtering based on the location you're in. So a bunch of great things there, and you should check that out. Final way to consume content, and I know it's a long list, but I just want to make sure you've seen them all, is Cortana. If you have Windows 10, you can set it up so that Cortana doesn't just give you answers about traffic, it can also give you answers about your own organization's data. Cortana, she can give you answers from Power BI, and she can also return report sheets that are specially formatted for Cortana. You basically have to enable the data set for use in Cortana inside of Power BI, and then the user has to have access to that dashboard or report either through dashboard sharing or a content pack. And then finally, there's some setup steps you need to do on Windows 10, namely just you need to be signed in with a work or school account. That link there will give you the specific instructions on how to do it. Okay, I've shown you a lot of slides. I want to demo some of these things so you see exactly how they work, and then we'll come back and talk about security and compliance. Okay, first, I'd like to start by just showing a very simple dashboard here. This is one of the dashboards I have in Power BI, and it has a number of those different content types in it. In the top left, you'll see is an example of a live pinned report from Power BI Desktop. And this is a good example of how you can create dashboards that are interactive, that aren't just static. So I'll show you how I did this. If I go into my report here, this is the same report. And if you click Pin Live Tile, that lets you get this same view on your dashboard, so it can be interacted with right on the dashboard itself. I also have some examples of specific visuals from reports that I pinned. On the right-hand side here, I have an example of a visual from SQL Server Reporting Services. And the great thing here is that Reporting Services will update this thumbnail every time the data changes in Reporting Services so that it's always up to date in your dashboard. When you click this, it will click through to the Reporting Services report. I mentioned that we have widgets too. You can even have a live stream of your retail store so you can see what's going on there. I have something else at the bottom here that's a piece of Excel content. So in this case, I pinned a pivot table from an Excel report, and if I click through on that, we'll drill through the actual Excel report here, which again is fully interactive like you might expect. I could go and say, let's sort these regions, and it's going to go and sort it just the way it would in Excel Online. So a whole bunch of different kinds of content. And as I mentioned, we keep on adding new kinds of content to the dashboard, and one of the recent ones was the streaming real-time tiles, and I'll just show you how easy it is to add one of those. So I'll click Add Tile here, and we have custom streaming data. For this example, I used our integration with PubNub, and PubNub, as I mentioned, is a popular provider of real-time streaming infrastructure. You can connect all of your sensors to a PubNub streaming network and then consume it easily in Power BI. So in this case, I'll use this one that I previously set up, and it's just a temperature sensor. So I'm just going to go and add over time the current, I don't want radiation. I'll do temperature. That sounds more friendly. Okay, and I'll call this store temperature. And I'll hit apply here. And here we can see instantly, we now have streaming data on my dashboard. So Power BI dashboards really are the aggregator. Everything from your Power BI desktop reports to live streaming data, you can put it all in one dashboard so you really have the 360-degree view of your business. From the dashboard, you can do things. I want to show one other thing, which is editing the phone view. Okay, so I mentioned that we have these mobile optimized dashboards for phone. I'm going to show creating it here, and then I'll show it on the mobile a little bit later. Now, in this dashboard, it might be hard to get all of this content to show nicely in a phone. So with the phone dashboard layout, you can actually remove certain tiles. You can reorder them, like maybe I want my transaction rate at the top here. Great. And then I can go ahead and close this out. And now, you'll see later when I go back to my dashboard in the phone, it'll use that new layout. One other neat trick is we have this full screen mode. So if you have a TV in your hallway, you can put it into full screen mode, and you'll have a live streaming, updating dashboard with all the most important metrics in your business. OK, so those are a whole bunch of different kinds of content you can put on your dashboard. I want to talk a little bit about the collaboration piece now. So I mentioned how important group workspaces were, and I'm following my own best advice. Because you'll notice that all of my content down here is in a group workspace called Fabrikam Global Services. And here's my workspace up here, which is just for my own content. But I create most of mine in this group workspace. And you can click the ellipses here and edit group. And that's where you can go and add additional members to the group. And all of these people that you add as members to the group will be able to edit the dashboards and reports and change all the settings. So I mentioned the easiest way to share content is to just share the dashboard. And so I can click the share icon up here and just simply enter in people I want to share it with. So we have autocomplete. So if I type in Alice, who's in my organization, I can just share with her. But I can also enter in the email address of someone outside of my organization. So I'll put in adam@teamwilson.ca. And it will go and send an email invite to Adam, and he'll be able to view this dashboard. It's important to know that people outside your organization can't edit the dashboard or upload their own content. It really is just viewing what you've shared with them. So once I click share, that would go and send email notifications to those people, and they'd be able to view those dashboards. I can later go back in through the share panel and manage who has access and even revoke access. But it's a very simple way to distribute content. I want to show, though, what it looks like to create an organizational content pack. So what I'm going to do is share this dashboard and a bunch of the reports that are used by it with a group of people in my organization. And so to do that, I click the settings gear. And you see the Create Content Pack link here. That'll take me into the Content Pack creation experience. I can either share with everyone in my organization, or I can share it with specific groups. And so in this case, I'm going to share it with the sales ops team. So this is a security group for my organization. And I could even share it with individuals too here. So I'll call this sales reporting. I can give it a little bit of personality too. I can upload a nice logo to use for it. That'll get the salespeople excited. And then I can choose what I want to share. So in this case, I'll choose this dashboard, and it automatically chooses all the reports and data sets that are used by it. So when I hit publish here, this makes this organizational content pack available in the Get Data experience for all of the end users in my organization that have access to it based on who I secured it to. So I'm now going to switch over to a different browser tab. And this is the thing about collaboration demos. You need to look at this picture on the top right, because it's going to change, because I'm going to be a different person. So I'm no longer the person creating the content. I'm going to switch here over to Mario. Where is he? Yep, there's Mario. And he was one of the people in that sales ops group that I shared with. So I'm now going to go to Get Data and get data from my organization. And here's that same sales reporting content pack. And when I click Get, it's going to go and add that into my Power BI experience. If you want to, you can send out a link directly to that content pack for people to go install it if you don't want them to browse and get it through Get Data. And we're going to be working the rest of this calendar year on making it even easier to distribute these content packs to users in your organization. OK, there we go. So now I have that retail performance dashboard that got installed with the content pack and all of the reports and data sets that came with it. Now, as a recipient, I get a read-only view here. So I can interact with everything, right? But I can't move these dashboard tiles around. I can't go and edit reports, which is fine for many users. Many people only want read-only views. But in your organization, you might have a few power users that really want to go and explore the data further. And this is great sometimes because it relieves some of the burden on reporting teams if you can get your end users to get some insights themselves. So it's possible to do that with Power BI as well. I can take one of these dashboards that was shared through a content pack, and I can make a copy of it. And once I make a copy, we're going to see copies get created in my own workspace. And then I can go, let's pick one of these reports, this site analytics report, and now I can edit it to make it my own. So maybe I don't want to look at all site traffic. Maybe I'm focused on mobile. So I just want to look at mobile traffic to my website. So I can take device category, And I'll add that as a filter here, and I'll just filter it to mobile. And I'm a short-term person, so I only want to show data in the last 30 days instead of 90. And I want to call this like monthly mobile report. Then I can go ahead and save that. So an individual analyst who receives a content pack can go and customize it for their own use. They can even go and reshare this if they have the permissions to. And it really enables people to get more value from the data you share with them. The great part about this, though, is that the person that created the content pack, they still retain control over the data set and the scheduled refresh settings. So you don't have rogue data sets that get out of date. No, it's all based on that central data set, but people can just go and create reports on it. OK, I want to show a few more quick ways to consume here. I mentioned that we have this natural language search at the top. I'll just show one quick example, and then you can all try this on your own. So I'm going to go and type in sales summary, which is one of the report pages I created. So I can type that in, and then it brings it right back here. The great thing is, with Q&A, you can filter your data just using words. So if I want to look at this for one day, I can type in for October 8, 2015. And it's going to take that report and filter it down just to that date. If I want to look at it just for one of my product categories, I can put in 4 computers. Yep, and it gives me autocomplete there. And it's going to filter down and just show it for computers. So with Q&A, sometimes you don't even need to build reports for your end users. You can just give them access to the data, do a good job with data modeling, and then they can get answers themselves. The last thing I want to show that uses natural language is Cortana. And I've gone through the steps to set up Cortana on my machine. And I have this data set shared with me. So now I can just ask a question like, well, show me more my inventory level for the Bellevue store. And here we can see that the best match comes from Power BI. And I can click through on this, and it shows me a complete Power BI report page optimized for Cortana that I set up before. So I don't have the time to go into the details in this, but I strongly encourage you to take a look at these novel ways of sharing data with your end users. Final thing I'll show you in terms of distribution is alerts. So if I want to set up an alert and hourly transaction rate, I can just click the ellipses and click alert here. And it's really simple to add an alert rule to say, OK, well, send me an alert if this threshold is above 250. And then you can determine whether it gets sent every hour if you really want lots of emails, or once a day. And so whenever your data gets refreshed with scheduled refresh, or in the case of direct query, every 15 minutes, we evaluate this, and we'll send an email if that condition is matched. OK, so those are a whole bunch of different ways to share your data. I want to show you quickly what this looks like on mobile. So let me just open up my mobile device here. Okay, we're good. OK, so now we can see my view on Power BI Desktop, and I can see the dashboards that I have here. And I can click through on retail performance, and I can see the same view that I configured on the website. And I can use all the mobile features, like if I want to drill into one of these particular visuals, I can even go and share that with people, create a little annotation, say, hey, that value is low, and then go and send an email very easily with it. Okay? So very simple, but everything you set up on the Power BI site and those mobile optimized dashboards you create are very easily consumed on iOS and on a whole bunch of other different platforms. OK, we're going to go and talk about security. And Dima, would you mind just reconnecting the laptop while we do that? OK, I know this is a really important topic for you, and we're going to go through some details here. There are 2 aspects to security that I want to cover. The first part is what Power BI does to secure your data. And the second part is what you can do to configure and restrict access based on your organization's policies. So in terms of how Power BI secures your data, I'm going to talk through the user authentication system that we use. And I just want to make a few points right now about encryption. You can read that security white paper that I linked at the bottom for all the details. It's a very comprehensive document that talks about what we do to secure your data. But we do use transport security when the data flows between our systems and your systems and your users. And also, one thing I want to mention is that we do encrypt your data at rest, and this is something that we've been asked about a lot recently, and that's something that we fully support in Power BI. That's not updated in the Power BI security white paper, but it will be next week. So if you're looking for some documentation of exactly how we do that, if you go look at the security white paper next week, you'll see that too. So on the left side, I just want to walk through the user authentication. The good news is Power BI uses Azure Active Directory for user authentication, which is the same system used by the other Microsoft Cloud services, like Office 365 or Dynamics CRM. So it supports both managed directories that you've set up, but also if you just have a few users that are trying out Power BI in your organization, they can create what's called an unmanaged directory, which just lets them try it out without creating a tenant administrator to administer that yet. Everything you set up in AAD can be applied to Power BI too. So if you set up federation for single sign-on with your on-prem AD using ADFS, that'll work for Power BI. If you set policies around passwords or self-service password reset, that also applies to Power BI. And again, if you use Azure Active Directory conditional access, that works with Power BI as well. So all of those base user authentication mechanisms in Azure Active Directory are picked up by the Power BI system. The other major advantage of using Azure Active Directory is that the security groups that you configure in your AAD tenant are also used to secure assets in Power BI. So if you are syncing using DirSync your on-prem security groups, those are available in Power BI to secure content through dashboard sharing or to secure organizational content packs, as I demoed earlier. I want to talk next about the data authorization flow, because there are a number of places in the stack where you can control how access to data is granted. The first one is about controlling who has access to the reporting assets. And I showed this through the distribution section. You can control who has access to dashboards through dashboard sharing, and you can control who has access to organizational content packs. So that's one way at the very top of the stack to determine who has access. And that's just access to the assets and the data that's underneath it. It doesn't do anything more fine-grained than that. The second way that access is controlled is through access to the data source itself. And Dima talked about this extensively. In the case of most data sources, the 2A case here, you configure one service account that is used to authenticate with that data source. So in this case, all of the queries from users or all of your scheduled refreshes are going through one set of credentials. So really, it's like an administrative access that all users share when that data is brought into Power BI. Dima mentioned that SQL Server Analysis Services is a bit different, and that's the 2B flow. And in this case, we take the user's credentials, the user who's logged into Power BI, and when they're using a report that's based on analysis services, we pass those user credentials all the way through to the data source so that you can authorize in analysis services based on that particular user. And this is great if you want to use row-level security and analysis services. And then the third place where authorization is controlled is in Power BI itself. And here you can set up something called row-level security, which lets you set up row filters so that certain users see different rows of data depending upon who they are. And this is really powerful. For example, if you have a sales team and they should only be able to see their own accounts, you can implement that using row-level security. There are a whole bunch of different policy controls that you can set with Power BI. You can do things like preventing certain users from accessing Power BI entirely, and that's something you can do through the Office 365 portal. You can use AAD conditional access to enforce multi-factor auth or even prevent people from accessing Power BI off the corporate network. You can turn off a bunch of the features of Power BI. So for example, if you don't want publish to web to be enabled so people can't share outside the organization, you can turn that off, all within the Power BI admin portal. You can set up a bunch of mobile features using mobile application management to enforce pins or to prevent sharing to apps like Facebook, because, I don't know, many people don't want their data on Facebook, surprisingly. And then finally, you can audit Power BI activity through the Office 365 auditing portal. There are a whole bunch of ways to set this up. If you want to take a screenshot, this is the perfect one to take a screenshot of, because all of those links give you great ways to set those up. The one thing I will mention is that in some organizations, it's been hard to do some of this configuration because you needed to be an Office 365 global administrator to access the Power BI admin portal. We're fixing this problem. So in October, we'll introduce a new role called the Power BI admin role that you can assign to particular people in your organization so they can administer Power BI. Oh, okay. I know. It took a while to get that done, but we really heard your feedback. So this should really help in terms of scoping who can access it and not following all the requests through a central team. Okay, we're going to go and do some quick demos because we're a bit short on time here. So switch over to this.
Great.
Okay, we're going to start quickly with a demo of RLS. I'm going to go to Power BI Desktop, where I have a report here with a bunch of costs and sales prices across many different brands. And let's say that I have certain divisions of my organization, and I only want those divisions to be able to see the brands that they sell, and not all of them. So in Power BI Desktop, the way that I do this is I go and manage roles. So a role is a group of people that have a specific set of data that they can see. So in this case, I've created a role for each of my different divisions. Okay? Once I've created a role, I can then go and create row filters that get applied to the people in that role. So in this case, I'm going to filter down my brand table so that people in the appliances division only see these brands. And I just write a DAX expression to contain that particular row filter I want, and that's what gets applied. So I've done this for all my different roles here. Now, once I've done this, I can take this Power BI Desktop file and publish it to the Power BI service, and that's where I do the final step. And if I go back to my brand comparison data set here, okay, I can go into the security settings for this data set, and here's where I see those same roles again, and I can now map this to the individual people that are members of that role. And again, I can either use individuals, or I could also put in the sales ops team. Whoops. My autocomplete is not working here. Well, you can put in the sales ops team of the groups of people that are in this role as well. So once you've done this, individual users will now see the different data. So here I am Mario, and I'm seeing ADatum and Fabricam. And then if I switch over to another user, okay, here I'm Alice, and here I see Litware, Southridge, and the phone company. So that's pretty simple. You just define roles, you set a row filter for each of those roles, and then you choose which people are in the roles. And you can have a system where different people see different data. There are more advanced configurations called dynamic RLS, where you can actually, from the data, determine which particular rows users see. If you look on our blog, you'll see examples of how to do that, but I don't have time to show it here today. The second thing I want to show is the Power BI admin portal. So right now, I click the settings gear here in Power BI, and because I'm an Office 365 Global Administrator, or soon a Power BI admin, I see this link for the admin portal. And when I go there, I can see both some high-level usage metrics for my use of Power BI, how many users I have, the most popular data sets, the users that are creating the most reports, so some high-level information. But I can also get some very low-level auditing information too. So if I click the Audit Logs tab, it gives me a link to go to the Office 365 Security and Compliance portal. And this is where Power BI auditing information is published alongside all of the other auditing information for Office 365. And it gives me a simple interface to go and search that. So here we can see all of the activities in my organization, from activities that happen on SharePoint to things that happen in even Sway. And then down at the bottom, you'll see that there are Power BI activities. So I can filter to show just Power BI activities. And I'll just look at it for the last week here, and maybe I just want to look at series activities. And when I click search, I can see the detailed audit logs, and I can drill into the details to see exactly what Siri did. You can access it through the portal, but you can also use PowerShell to automatically export it, a great way to use that in a report or any other sort of analysis you want to do. Going back to the admin portal, I also want to point out briefly the tenant settings. This is what I mentioned when you can turn off different things in your organization, from external sharing to publish to web. You can even set up data classifications so that your individual dashboards have labels based on the sensitivity of the data. That can be all configured here. Final thing I want to mention is something that is in the Azure Active Directory configuration experience in the Azure portal. And this is something called conditional access. So if you go into your directory in the Azure portal, here we go, here's themeasuredproduct.com, you can go and configure settings for your applications. So if I click the Applications tab, I see Power BI right alongside all the other applications I use. And if I go in there, I can configure these conditional access policies. And this is something many of our users have asked for. So if I turn this on, I can do things like require multi-factor authentication, either all the time or only when people are off of my work network. I can enable this policy for all users, or if I only have some users that have the most sensitive data, I can restrict it again down to one group. So very powerful settings for you to restrict how people access your data. It's something that's configured in Azure Active Directory, but it applies to Power BI. And on that screen I showed you before about policies, there's a link to a blog post on how to configure that. OK, that was a whole bunch of demos, but I hope it gave you a pointer on how to get started with some of those capabilities. I do want to mention that there are a number of other sessions on Power BI throughout the rest of the conference. One that I want to point out in particular that's happening right after this is the deep dive into effective authoring of reports and dashboards. We didn't cover any of that here, but there's an entire dedicated session to it. Also, the ones at the top are really useful as good examples of dashboard design, and those will be available for on-demand streaming too. We have a few minutes for questions, but I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today. Good luck with your Power BI deployments, and we look forward to hearing from you on the Power BI community. So thank you very much. OK, we'll take questions at the mic. And Dima, could you just grab me the T-shirts in that bag right there? Oh. We have T-shirts for the people that ask questions. So.
Hey, all right. What is the licensing model when you share a dashboard to a non-org user?
The question was, what is the licensing model when you share outside your organization? So if you share a dashboard, that dashboard can either be a free dashboard or a pro dashboard. If it's a free dashboard, anyone can access it. They don't need to have Power BI or any particular license. If it's a pro dashboard, that recipient needs to have a Power BI Pro license inside of their own tenant.
One more question. If I'm building this for an internet-facing app where I'm using Forms authentication or what's the solution there? Is that Power BI embedded if I want to report some data in there for that user? So I get user's context?
That's a bit of that will take a longer answer, but we can do it on the whiteboard. OK, you don't get 2 T-shirts, you only get 1, but come on up and grab a T-shirt here. We also have other stuff too. Yes?
Hi. Currently, it's a security issue when you connect the enterprise gateway to analyzing services data source. I need to make the user, which I share the dashboard, administrator on the analyzing services, which is quite a scary perspective. So do you have any plans to fix this? Because this is, from audit perspective, it's a nightmare. It's in the tip and tricks in the Power BI.
Dima, the user that has access to a dashboard with Analysis Services Live Connect, they have to be an administrator on Analysis Services?
No, they do not. As long as they have access
I show you the link from you. So saying it's explicitly saying that, yeah.
Maybe we fix that, but we'll go and make sure that the documentation.
But one thing, they need to have a pro license. One thing I forgot talking about Gateway, that any dashboard or report using, it's considered a pro content. So anyone who wants to access the report, they need to have a pro license and a pro subscription to be able to see it.
Oh, yeah.
For analysis services, you need to have access to the data.
Yeah,
but not be admin on it.
It's in your website saying it should be administrator on the analyzing services, which is quite scary.
No. Okay, I'll take a look.
Come grab a T-shirt or a sticker. Okay.
For the refreshes, have you guys looked at doing other type of event-based refreshing? So we could have the data warehouse builds, it updates a static file, and then all these reports would refresh.
Yeah, there's no way to automate a on-demand refresh. You can do it from the portal. I mean, that's a good idea, and we've heard it from other people. It's something that we might want to look at in the future. But for now, if you want to do an on-demand refresh, you can do that from the portal.
Do you guys have a Connect item already out there and you're aware of?
There is a item on ideas.powerbi.com. If you go vote for it, that'll help us build it faster, and then we'll also notify you when we're working on it.
Great, thank
Okay,
you.
come grab a T-shirt or a sticker.
Hi. And concerning the gateway, now you have to have a user, admin user, or can you use a service account? Because that's not. I
Sorry?
think now it has to be a physical user with a Power BI license.
Can you use a service account for the gateway?
Signing in for the gateway.
Because now it has to be a user with an Office E
It
license.
needs to be an AAD user,
Yeah.
and it could have a Power BI license. It needs to have a Power BI license if you want to use it in the Power BI service.
Okay, but it doesn't have to be an E license of Office 365.
No,
only
no,
a Power
no.
BI.
It could be just a Power BI license.
okay.
Yep.
We made it a generic AAD to enable the other services we showed, like Power Apps, Flow, and
Okay.
Logic Apps to use it. But if you're just a Power BI user, you should be able to sign in.
Okay, we'll try it out then.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have a shared data source with one content pack that points to that shared data source, and you want to segregate the data that's in the data source, like financial data, you can't see it and they can,
That's
how do you
wrong.
do that?
So if you have one data source and you want some people to be able to see financial data and other people not,
Yeah.
one solution is RLS. So you could create two different roles
And I
for the
need
people
to-
that could and couldn't see it. And then you could apply a role filter
I'm gonna
to
take
basically
your-
remove all
what's your
financial
email?
data. The other option is,
So,
That would be
sorry,
great.
row
Thank you.
level filter, but what if it was column level?
yeah, we don't support removing the columns, but
Okay.
you could just filter out the data from it. The other option you could do is you could just have two different data sets. If you really wanted to have a different schema, you could have one data set that had the full schema that everyone could see, and another data set with the more restricted
With the
schema.
limited.
And then you could create one content pack for each of them.
Okay, second question. How do you handle reports and content packs that were created by people who have left the company?
So the best way to handle this is to put the reports and content packs and dashboards inside of a group workspace. Because then, even if one person leaves the company, the other people in that workspace can still go and edit it. So that's why we strongly recommend group workspaces.
Okay, thanks.
Okay?
Okay, so a question about the gateway. I got a lot of data flowing through the gateway, and I was wondering, are there any load balancing possibilities or
So
solutions?
load balancing and also high availability are both coming next year, but not this year.
Q1 or
Sorry?
Q1 or Q4?
Nothing
Okay.
to share yet. But load balancing, if you're using analysis services, it will honor whatever load balancing rules you have for analysis services. So if a gateway is connected to one, it will honor that. Yeah. You'll have to
Yeah.
wait.
I'd like to mount a large screen TV into an area and display data in real time, just graphs. I'm in an environment where I can't use the cloud at all. How would I go about, can I do that?
Well, if you're in an environment where you can't use the cloud, what we'd recommend is SQL Server reporting services. So, I mean, you can use that and you can have a report there. It doesn't have exactly the same streaming capabilities that we have in Power BI, but if you really can't use the cloud for your particular application, that would be what we'd recommend.
So I wouldn't use Power BI at all then?
No, Power BI is going to require a connection to our service in order to render the dashboards. Yeah.
Can I take the Power BI client and just run it on that big screen TV, and can I get it to refresh?
Well, with Power BI desktop, even if it's a direct query source, it's not going to refresh itself. You'd have to do some special automation to get the refresh button to be hit. I haven't heard of anyone that's done it, but if you get that to work, you should send us a video.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hi. You're planning support for incremental data load?
So the question was, do we have support for incremental data load? So
It's one of the big blocking points for right now to load
Yeah, I hear what
5
you're
years
saying.
of data every day into a
Yeah.
data model.
Right now, we don't have incremental data load in the Power BI service. What we recommend to customers in that case is you can always use a analysis services model and use incremental data load as part of that, and then connect that to Power BI. It's something we're aware of, but it's just not something we have right now.
Secondly, how would you create 5 reports based on the same data model?
The question was
instead
how.
of having 5 versions of the same data model in.
Got it. Well, if you use the gateway, this is something that helps you there. Because if you publish a Power BI desktop report that uses a gateway data source, it doesn't create 5 data sets under the covers. No. Yeah. So that would be probably what we'd recommend.
But it will. If you create the report in your desktop and you publish it, you make another report, give it another name
Yep.
with the same data model. If you publish it again, you will have two instances of the same data set. And you
Yes.
have to synchronize both of them. So again, with 5 years of data, you will start.
You start getting a lot. I
a
mean,
lot
for
of
that,
data.
that's really where direct query shines, because with direct query you don't get multiple copies of it. But yeah, I mean, we
But
hear
for
that
5
that's-
years of data, direct queries is not really, let's say, tangible to query every time, right? So.
Well, I mean, hopefully you're not, doing a data extract in your report, because that may not perform either way. But like, that would be the approach for a large volume of data like that, where you can't fit it in the Power BI service.
Okay.
Okay.
I see a long
Yeah.
list.
Come grab a T-shirt.
Question about Power BI refresh. Can I invoke, let's just say via PowerShell or REST API, the refresh process?
The question is, can you invoke a refresh from API? So you can't do that.
The reason for my question, I want to integrate with my enterprise scheduler.
Yes.
Just say I want to pull data from the OLAP cube. The OLAP cube refreshes not on a specific time. I wanted to integrate that. So that's the reason for that question.
Yeah, that's a great piece of feedback. We don't support it today, but I recommend you go vote for the idea on that in the Power BI Ideas forum. Then we'll let you know when we have it.
Okay, and as a follow-up on the refresh, I'm assuming it's based on the relay feature of the service bus. Is that true or not?
So
in other words, the gateway is not accessible from outside.
No, it's basically a reverse proxy. It connects up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to start downloading desktop and start using it. When I publish to a workspace, does that go to a portal, a Power BI portal, or where does that go if I just have a local instance of Power BI on my desktop?
When you publish from desktop to the service, yes, it goes to the service that we run that I was showing there.
Okay.
And then when you click the link in the publish window to go up to the service, that's where you can go and share that with other people.
Okay, and then they access that, whether I embed it in an application or, okay. great.
Absolutely.
You don't need Azure to be on the cloud to do that?
You don't need Azure, you just need a Power BI account.
Okay, great, thanks.
Hey, so can I save these files, Power BI files, directly on the reporting services? I think today it's not possible, but by when we should be getting this?
We talked about this in the roadmap session in the BRK 3132. So I'd say go look at that. I don't have time to go through the roadmap here, but it's talked about in that 3132 session. So that's going to be available for live streaming.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Are there plans to provide support for pinning read-only content, like read-only tiles to your own dashboard? So I have power users and I want to create some of these report tiles as curated content. I don't want them to make a copy of it and then they can do stuff. But I do want them to be able to create their own dashboards for their markets that have curated tiles.
Yeah, absolutely. If you share a content pack with your end users or a dashboard, they can take content on your dashboard and they can repin it to their own, which is...
Okay, so when I do that, it says read-only content can't be pinned yet.
When you do that from a content pack,
Yeah.
we'll go take a look at that afterwards. But in general, that would be the approach to do that with.
Okay, follow-up question. When I create a copy of a content pack, I get a message saying, hey, this will create a snapshot.
Yep.
So is it possible to have those copies refreshed as well?
You're talking about as an end user when you make a copy of a content pack. No, it really does make a copy of the reports and dashboards. So they are not linked anymore to the source. That's more just because those end users might go and customize them further. So no, they'd have to go and make another copy if they want to get the latest. Okay, come grab something here. And just out of respect for the next presenter, we're out of time for questions, but let me tell you something. I am going to be at the booth all day today, and I know Dime is as well. So if you have time to come to the expo, it's MS 46 and 47. It says Business Intelligence. I'd encourage you to all come and join us there, and we'd love to talk to you more and whiteboard some of these discussions. So thank you very much.